You have a wellspring of love inside you. As long as you use that, you don't need to know the path. That's something that came to me in 2016 in an ayahuasca vision, but is very a very great example to show what I mean by I found myself through echolocation, and what I mean by love is direct contact. I want to make another sort of vulnerable video today because being trans is vulnerable, okay? And then like explaining the way things were before, especially in my life to where they are now. It's like a blessing to me. It's like sacred. But then I work so hard to finally be here. Sometimes it's like hard to talk about the path because I'm just like, whatever. I'm so Ember, right? But looking back, there are things that I could tell you guys that I think are really interesting. They can be funny, they can be vulnerable, sometimes steamy or spicy, you know me. But I say it to you because it's sort of an expose of how I found myself through direct contact. It's almost like there was always a yearning in me to really feel where I didn't hide, that place where I could meet reality nakedly, like all the way down without like a little stutter. Actually, a little funny thing about me is I used to play a lot of soccer, not really because I like soccer, but because I was trying to earn this sort of acceptance from my father and pride and all those different things. But I played soccer, okay? And one funny thing that happened to me, because I'm a tall girl. Yes, all the guys out there, I'm a tall girl, okay? And being trans, when you're tall, you're like, I'm tall, like, oh no. And if I wear boots, then I'm really tall. But anyway, since I was so tall, I was a goalie, right? And when I would do like a free kick or whatever, or sorry, like a goal kick or, whatever, even like a free kick back by the box, there was a period of my life where the ball would be, set out there. And when I would run up to it, to kick it, I'd go through like a little stutter step, and like my dad tried to hire coaches to try to get rid of that stutter step and like try to have me, step better and like, and really and that stutter step there where you can't get to the ball cleanly because like I was interrupting my own self in my own mind with my own nervousness, and also to take one step back in like the in the soccer area. I remember when I was really little, my dad having me watch soccer and me thinking, oh, so that's the face you make when like you're trying to like, whatever, after a goal is scored or whatever. In other words, neurodivergent people might understand the masking, but it was almost like I was trying to fit myself in to a performance or like a mask. And that was also part of my stutter step because it was like, all the eyes are on you, and like it was like a performance for me. And I was doing it not because it flowed from my wellspring, not because the deepest part of me felt like harmonious with being a soccer player, but because I thought that if I did well enough, if I was strong enough, if I was, successful enough, if I saved enough balls, I would be, whatever the thing, my father wanted, or, would find me success and maybe, all those types of things. And so I did it for a long time. And like you could see that inside what's happening inside my experience. It wasn't Ember, and at the time, dead name, but Ember reality. It was Ember representational, mass performance, mass performance. What are they thinking? Am I pulling it off? Oh no, all these different ruminations and anxieties and little films upon reality. And what did that look like on the outside in this example I'm giving you? It was the stutter step. It was I literally, I looked like I was doing like a little jumping bean, thing. You know what I mean? Like, and it was embarrassing. And I don't know why I did. I didn't have a stutter step any other part. It was just the pressure of the situation and the layers of performance masking that I had to learn in order to become the soccer player that was playing at a competitive level. And then I played through college and I played semi-pro indoor. So I was stuck in Plato's cave for a long time, not recognizing my sovereignty from the wellspring of that place of direct contact where I could finally feel it all the way down. But there was layers of me, the axes of freedom, you could say, that were tuned towards finding almost like a simulacra of wholeness, right? And so then that's why I'm trying to explain this very vulnerable video. I want to say that from the outside, people saw this stuttering, cis presenting person. And again, this is very vulnerable for me to talk about. So thank you for being here with me. I'm so far into my transition now. I'm still feel like I'm a baby to some degree, but it's like a year and a half plus now. So I feel like I'm really sailing and it's an absolute blessing. But let me go back and be very vulnerable with you guys. So like, yeah, cis presenting, that type of thing. Um, uh from the outside, people saw me as this like tall, muscular. Let me get it right too. That's part of what I'm explaining. I was not like extremely muscular, but I was fit, you know what I mean? Eventually there was a time where I thought I had like a body like a Batman suit. Like, I'm not kidding. I'm not saying that to be weird or hierarchy or anything weird. I'm telling you like where I came from and what type of tuning of my system created that type of being and body and what you saw from the outside, and then where I'm at now. And I'm explaining that process through what I call echolocation, or a finding of direct contact again and again and again in my person, that place where I felt myself all the way down, like a dancer on the dance floor when the music finally hits me all the way down and I let my body just move to it, right? So then over time, that echolocation led me to what you see now, who I am now. And before it was Ember, representational layer, and then action. And the stutter step in my body, and then, on the soccer field, even in that example. And then people would see it in my nervousness, my anxiety, the way my softness had to be, sort of like not guarded, but you know what I mean? Like it has to be shunted down these corralling hallways, you could say, or something like that. Um, Versus now, I talk about lossless presence, like my tattoo. In the rhythm of reality, lossless presence is like riding the cymatic bloom or the waves of reality without loss of fidelity. Like you finally tuned into the radio station and all that noise in between, self and expression, or reality and expression, or however you want to say it, dissolved. And now it's from you. What you see is a raw ember signal. I don't know what I'm going to say. I generally had a feeling that I wanted to make a video, but I'm not sure what I was going to say. You know what I mean? And I say it all the time, but I literally watch my videos back and I'm like, oh my God. I say, especially the last one. If you saw that, go back and watch the last one. The systems are shadow banning me or whatever, not shadow banning me, but like not putting it in because it talks about intimacy, but it's a really hot one. It's a very vulnerable one, okay? There's like lips on the cover, okay? But going back, so it went from Ember, representational to expression, and those are all like stutter steps inside and then the example outside, to now having crossed the separatrix to a mode of being where presence is the way I live. Presence is touching reality, sovereignty is living there, and that's Ember, or self expression. Boom, it's just like one water slide of being. So how did I get there? How did I grow boobs? How did I, become me in a way that I set in like a dent that popped out? Well, I really want to talk about it, and it's difficult for me to talk about, so thank you for wrapping those very vulnerable parts of me. But like, for example, I mentioned I had a very nice body. Like, one funny thing that I wanted to mention, if I can mention it sort of lightly without like calling them out or like whatever, it's really weird for me to talk about, okay? But okay, let me say this. I never worked out because I wanted to be tough. Like, I worked out because I wanted to have someone see my body as the beauty that I felt inside me. It was like weird to explain it that way, but that's kind of how I felt. Like, if I could have a beautiful body on the outside, and I did, it was very like, if I met a guy with that type of body now, as weird as it is to say, I'd be like, wow, you are fucking ripped. You know what I mean? Like, I had like a runner ripped body type of thing. Um, and but I could never figure it out because the tuning of the way my, I like to say windows and magnets, or configuration of the axes of the freedom of my being, were tuned always towards indirect ways of relating, almost like the representational layers always had to come first, and those were always detuning me away from direct contact. And so then, no matter how nice my body was, no matter how many like open scenes of like, different things that I went to, like the orgy dome at Burning Man, even though I was really, really shy, it's not like I interacted with all these people, I still couldn't get it together. I still fumbled everything. I still stutter stepped everything, even with the right body. And so then, like, I think it was a couple days before my actual transition, there was a really sweet girl who I'd been friends with for a long time. And now I'm only into men, which is partially why I want to talk about this, which is so funny. But back then, there was a girl who was nice to me and I had lost everybody. And we actually did hook up at the time, right? And like, she told me almost, I think the day before I took my HRT shot, she's like, I just want to tell you, you have like the most perfect body I've ever seen, including like, it's hard. And I was like, you're like the final boss. And the reason I say it with all this like vulnerability and embarrassment, especially now, it's like so like, because I'm trying to say that like from my position, it was almost like you could almost say it was like reality sending me this like little like final boss check to be like, are you really sure you want to do this? Because now you have this girl who's actually pretty awesome, who's saying she wants you exactly because you're beautiful, exactly because she really thinks you have the perfect body and everything, And I'm like, no, I was still sure. Because what I was searching for, what I went into wasn't, please accept me, please give me more money, please think I'm cool, please like the thing between my legs or whatever. It was, I want to feel like me. And I've spent a lifetime of searching for that as a direct contact with reality, as a place where I feel myself all the way down, as a place where I finally feel real, as a place that I fall to my knees and say, why do I feel so real? And where have I been slumbering? And in my life, coming from a family where I could not even think of trans because I was so like programmed, you could say, in a way. And it's not even because they're like evil doers trying to program me. They were just people who my family who worked off of identity control. Their whole identity was performance, a mask to the outside world. That's how they lived their lives. And to an unknown sort of neurodivergent trans woman who was always just trying to find direct contact, that's like the antithesis of the emotionally avoidant, narcissistic, or in other words, my entire axes of freedom is indirectly tuned. That's like the kryptonite to them. So they would never accept direct contact. We never had a vulnerable conversation. I was never able to express the depth of my soul. And whenever I dressed in weird ways or I acted in weird ways, that was way over the top. It was, whoa, how could you ever do anything like that? And so then all that gets programmed in my head in a way that like I could not feel. I could feel like a the way I talk about it is my name is Ember, right? And that name came to me like all my songs. It just landed like a wave on the shore and said, that's it. That's it. That's my name, Ember. Because I'd written it in poems for a long time. And what I meant in the poems was my life was like putting my hands through ash, feeling for warmth. The warmth wasn't, I need to be a woman. I need to grow boobs. I need to, whatever, like, be Ember one day or something. It was, I need to be me. I need to feel where this weird, like, dent, this, like, weird, like, feeling like I could never truly let myself all the way down, like, let myself be all the way, let myself dance all the way through, let myself hear the music and just let my body shake however it wants to. Couldn't do that. No, not allowed. And honestly, in my story, even put it in my new article. I was like, I would do burlesque dancing and I literally thought maybe I can't do that many booty moves. And I didn't even know why. Because and for the longest time, I like especially because, not gender and sexuality are two different things, but many people bring those two together. And for me, it totally flipped, right? And I want to talk about that too. But for my whole life, especially in the family that I was in, it's not like I had like secret desires to be with men either. You know what I mean? It was almost that was so off limits. Trans men, everything was so off limits that like I could not even perceive it. It was like vague notions in my life, like, in different ways. And I definitely tried things. I was someone who always tried things. I tried something in college and I tried something, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 years ago, something like that. But they were both like really clunky, awkward interactions that never really got off the ground type of thing. And I've read other trans women have that with men because it was almost like wrong fit type of thing. I needed the topological shift. I needed the shift where, like I said, the kaleidoscope where the light finally clicks in and comes all the way in instead of hitting those murky layers, the representational layers that I talked about. It just, because I honestly would open my heart to feel the echolocation, to feel where I feel the thud, but I just did not feel the thud, no matter how hard I tried, type of thing. And I was really honest to that process. So now this brings me in that process of looking for my Ember, like under, like a feeling the warmth, having those moments of feeling it all the way down where the gap between expression and being closed. even if I was in my other form, it was almost like reality made a person that the chances of me transitioning were like almost zero. It was like anyone around me is like, you're tall, you're buff, you're a lawyer, you have a family, you have children. Like, there's no way you're ever gonna do that. Like, there's no way. And that's why my family freaked to the point they did. There was like, there's no way that you could ever like be that, right? And but for me, they could not see the person. First of all, they didn't want to directly relate to me. They didn't want to be vulnerable with me. They didn't want to open their soul with me. They didn't want to have a real conversation with me because that would be against the way they've set up their being. But beyond that, they did not see underneath this echolocating that I was doing. This way that the weird clothes that they saw were me trying to feel, ooh, a little closer, a little hotter, a little warmer, feels like me. You know what I mean? Not in a concept. That's why I'm trying to explain this. Imagine like you were like a car dent. It was dented and you didn't know how it was dented. You just felt a little off, like, ugh. And there was times where all of a sudden wow, I'm back to it. And honestly, that's actually part of what happened to me. There was moments at the end, like the last couple months before transition, I really started to think, well, what if I just absolutely accept myself like this? What happens to my body? And instantly, my body just like my muscle tension goes, my voice started to change a little bit. And I was like, that means that every other moment in my life, I was like a little bit tense, like a little bit, like a little bit of a shield, like that type of thing. And think about that. I'm 37 years old now. And yes, I've been transitioning for a year and a half, but that's a whole lifetime of keeping that like tense. It's like tense. It's like tense. You know what I mean? And that is like horrifying when you think of what Plato's cave really is. Because I felt free, right? I mean, I felt suffocated, but I felt like I was a person making decisions, right? So do you see how sovereignty is siphoned when those interaction points, those axes of freedom, are not tuned towards direct contact, towards closing the gap between expression and self, right? But they're tuned towards giving those away to outside authorities, to outside people, to the voice of your father in your head, to whatever it is. Like I played soccer for too long. I became an attorney when I didn't want to be an attorney. I did it for 11 years to support a family that dropped me instantly when I came out as me because they did not see this quest that I was on. That's why I went to every burn. That's why I became a burlesque dancer. That's why I dressed the way I did, because I was searching for a heat that I didn't know how it would pop the dent out and what would happen. I was a wellspring of love that was inside me. Love as direct contact, love as closing that gap, loving as being naked and vulnerable in the shared dance of this reality and allowing for it to affect me. Not to bullshit myself, not to lie to myself, to be honest to what my heart feels all the way down. And the more and more I did that, the more and more I would close the gap between those representational layers, and simulated presence became presence. Indirectly contacting reality became contacting reality. And in that contact, I ended up sowing the seeds of sovereignty, because sovereignty is just living in that place of contact where my being, like a whirlpool in the one current of this reality, retains my structure under pressure because I'm me resting in the place that was always me, not the constructed me from the outside, not the political idea of me, not accept me as a woman because it's a label, but because that's the way I dance when reality hits me all the way down, when I'm no longer hiding, when I've followed the wellspring of love for so long in my life that presence became sovereignty. And so I'm giving you this idea of someone who the odds of me transitioning were probably like the bet. If people were betting on the outside, they would have no clue. They would bet millions of dollars, you know what I mean? On the outside. Like I said, I was buff. I was like, I would like lead my own burns, you know what I mean? Like I was always soft, you know what I mean? I was always like really soft. And people would tell me things like sweetheart and stuff like that, and my heart would melt and I wouldn't know. And I've said so many things on these videos, but what I wanted to give you the feeling of is I had that bit of like, almost like not consciously, but almost like could never be me, type of thing. And really what that was is the accesses of my freedom tuned towards my father's voice, tuned towards these things that siphon my sovereignty. Because sovereignty is not something you construct. Sovereignty is something you find when you stop hiding. When you let the music of the dance hit you all the way down, and now all of a sudden you're just dancing. You're just doing whatever dance you normally do. Not a dance that you construct, a dance that happens when you are one with the music. When you stop that, all the accesses of freedom of your being, stop becoming simulated presence, stop becoming a simulacra, and become reality, contact, No more representational layers that are, at least they can come afterwards, after the contact. It's almost like you're surfing the waves of reality, and you don't need to know fluid dynamics to know, how to surf the waves. That's like a balancing on a bike or a balancing on a surfboard more than it is. Or in other words, contact with reality, mechanical presence is mechanical, consciousness resolves in synchrony, not syntax, rather than knowing the fluid dynamics of every theory of the way the wave moves. And so do you see how, in that same sense, it was almost like my whole life was like trying to get back up on the board. Oh, there's a moment, I'm on the crest, I'm on the crest, direct contact. And my whole family was like, you could never be soft, you can never be you can never blah blah blah. And so like all those influences were like, you'll never be a surfer. You'll never be able to surf on your own topology. When the light hits you, you're always going to have to do a little bit of a and I kept finding the places where I didn't have to do that anymore, where it felt like a water slide, because my deepest agency, my deepest identity were coming from that direct contact all the way down, the shared vulnerable, shared entrainment of, presence, of touching reality all the way down across all the bits of my topology. And I could only do it mostly briefly. And at Burning Man, I would find clicks and say, why do I feel like this? Why does it feel like my eyes are more open? Why does it feel like I can like be closer with people and share more of my heart? Why do I feel like I'm softer than ever? Like, what is that? Again, I didn't understand where the dent was. You know what I mean? I just knew there was a dent, and I kept trying to pop it out. And there was moments where it would kind of sort of pop out, right? So I went into my HRT appointment, and this is while my wife was already, by the time my ex, again, which is another thing I want to talk about, though I'm only interested in men, but again, ex, which is a whole other thing. Like, what, I like, everything burned down at once, right? Like, everybody blamed me, even if watching me get physically attacked, even though they watched me get told to die by the worst people involved in this situation. Everyone, like burned it down at once. And so in that leap, I landed in the only spot that ever could, like, I could only ever like truly land in, which is the spot of the least resistance, the spot of the least energetically dense way to arrange across my oscillatory system. In other words, shared entrainment. In other words, direct contact. In other words, Ember. And I didn't know where that dent was going to pop out. So anyway, when I went into that HRT appointment, they were like, well, they got to go over the things. They're like, are you okay with like what is the main thing that you want from this? And I said, um, I want internal alignment. That was the most shy little way that I could say it, because that was the quest that I knew I was on, the Wellspring quest, right? And then she said, well, are you okay with like the fat distribution, the fat distribution? And I was like, I guess so. Yeah, it all comes with a package, right? And like honestly, I felt that because I was coming through. It was almost like I was swimming up towards a sunlight in murky water. And like in swimming up towards the sun, I knew the sun was there. And people are like, nah, the sun's not there. Stop that direct contact. That'll never be you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Stay in the murky water. And I said, no, there's a sun up there. And then like, as I like started to like swim up, I knew there was a sun up there, but like I could never knew what it was, like know what it was, or that how warm it could be, or what it would be to actually take my first breath. I just knew I needed the sun, internal alignment, direct contact, that moment where I don't have to hide anymore, the moment I don't have to translate myself anymore, the moment when reality hits me, there's no more translation layers that end up being simulated presence or the little stutters like I did when I was a soccer player. Just that smooth run up and kick as if it's just water off a duck's back, like the way the water runs. The least energetically dense way to arrange across a system, like all my mechanical pistons of what were me, were finally in that shared dance, like a chorus, like an orchestra, all playing to one rhythm. That place, like you've heard me say, where the many know themselves as one while remaining many. That is a scaled invariant. You see that? Okay. So I went in asking for internal alignment, and it was almost like Geronimo type of thing, right? Um, so then, like, when I did it, I remember I've said it before, like taking the shot in a parking lot alone. And I knew in my bones, but at the same time, I was shaking. I was scared. I was crying, but I was happy. And it finally clicked within like 48 hours, 24 hours really. And it hit me so hard that if someone said, I'll give you $1 trillion or to not do any more shots, I would say, keep all your money, because there's nothing more important than feeling love all the way down as me, than feeling embodied all the way down as me. And the thing is, I couldn't have known. I was someone who said, I would have never been with a guy. I could have never shown my friends or family that I had possibly could have been interested in men, even though it never really came up to the surface. You know what I mean? Like these were all like vague notions that only happened when the dent actually popped out. Right? I had every reason not to jump. My body, my success, my career, my family. But no one around me wanted to understand that it was me, finally, underneath all those representational layers, the place where I was no longer distorted to reality. And so like that's why the men thing is also interesting to say. Like, wait, hold on, the hormones change your sexuality? No, before in every sexual experience, I didn't even give myself that option. You know what I mean? I was just with women, and like I was really soft, and like I wanted to be topped, and like whatever, all these different things. But I also knew that like at the time, especially, I wasn't into men. I wasn't like I was like trying to be with men, or I had a secret life where I was being with men. It wasn't like that at all. In other ways, I was trying to find more toppy women to see if they could like make that fit, because my tuning was so as such that in a way it could never be me. I could never even open that door. I didn't even know what was beyond it. You know what I mean? But the difference is where the rubber hits the road. Remember how I said the stutter, the representational realities that are making the stutter inside my being, that feels like simulated presence. Like one time, a long time ago, I was hooking up and I thought, does she want me to be me or the person that she thinks I am? And do you see that outside? I remember someone telling me, "Oh, you didn't look nervous." Inside, I was having like a nuclear meltdown. I couldn't even experience anything of the experience that was happening, because in my head it was like I don't know, it was like this like simulated, almost like anxious rumination. You know what I mean? That makes it feel like the music is being played and I'm not even hearing the music that's playing. Like someone's playing my favorite track and I'm not even hearing it, even though the music literally going in my ears, because there's so many little representational realities snagging the clear signal of what reality is before it gets all the way down to my true being. Do you hear that? Like the kaleidoscope, get all the way down to my true being. And in my journey, I just happened to echolocate my whole life to realize that is the door right there. And I saw the HRT door. I felt it all the way down. And without any guarantees, without any recursive certainty on the outside, I jumped. And what I found was not oh, I am better, I'm found better socially, or people find me more attractive, or whatever it is. I found that place where I stopped hiding. Not in concept, but in the place where my full being rests into presence, where every day now I wake up as me is sacred. Because when I said the thing about the money and the $1 trillion, I meant it. You stack up any power in the world, it doesn't matter. Feeling me was like an old radio station, all the sound, and you kind of hear the music in the background, and then all of a sudden you switch it to the right channel, and it's clear. No amount of money would be worth going through life with all those representational layers, with the stutter on the dance floor, right? Do you see what I'm saying? So, and then the same thing with like, guys that like the first time I hooked up with a guy, and that video's on this, and really watch the last video. It's so steamy. It's so vulnerable. Oh my God. I watched it back. I'm like, oh my God, I said that. Okay. Anyway, the first time I did a certain thing, for example, with a guy, without mentioning it, I was like, oh my God, like, can I do this? I was like, yep, I can do it. Can I go further? Oh, I can go further. Ooh, I like this. And I was like, and then I was like, wait, like the fact that felt like the dent popped out. I was like, I can't believe I went my entire life doing something different. Like, it's almost like I was wearing shoes that were like way too small, and I finally got the right size. And I'm like, oh my God, this is actually comfortable. Not because I'm trying to make it comfortable, but because it just works. I just start dancing. I just start walking. There's no uncomfortability. There's no friction. There's no simulated presence. And I never knew. I never knew. It was like my whole being was programmed to never, to have, oh, I brought this. Let's see. Let's see, this is gonna be silly. Like, have like a veil over me. It's like, I'm buff. People like my body. I'm successful. I have more zeros in my bank account. People like the image of me, And I was like, no, I'm just a little ember underneath. And people are like, you can see it from the outside. It was like horrifying to some people around me. They were like, Like I had guy friends that were like obsessed with like, not obsessed, but they were like, oh, how did you get so ripped? And like, how can I do that? And I'm just like, I don't know. I didn't really try that hard. I guess I just have good genetics or something. But in a way I did feel like from high school, I did try to make my body beautiful, like I said, but I never got that. Could you imagine? No one ever actually scooped that part of a part of me, that part of my heart. Okay, you hear you are you out there, boys? You hear that? Because I needed them to meet the girl all the way down. And before, when the kaleidoscope was all opaque, in other words, the layers between being and expression had all that opacity, so that when you look through the kaleidoscope, it's like you couldn't see all the way through. Now, in my current form, especially. But as soon as I transitioned, I felt that embodied presence. But now in my current form, it's like you get raw ember signal. And you know what I'm dying for? Yes, I'm dying for more contact and, more sex and stuff like that. But not just like anything. I want real contact on my real person because I never experienced someone who's actually reaching all the way in to my ember, the thing that I kept safe in that search underneath the ash my entire life. She's finally here. Yes, I'm 37 years old, but I'm here all the way down. Not as a different version of me, but as then the dent popped all the way out and the thing that I've always been finally came into fidelity. Like a radio station that was always off tune a little bit, and then you go, and it goes into tune. You're like, oh my God, that's what we were always hearing. We were supposed to be on 94.5, but we were on 94.4. You know what I mean? And like my whole life was my family saying, you're 94.4. You better be 94.4. And like, you know how much bravery it took in a way? I don't even call it bravery because it was really just like the little girl in me yearning for direct contact, yearning for a life where I could finally do this and say, this is me all the way down. Not as like a concept, not as a political position, not as a proof, but as a deal with it. As a this is how I dance. If you don't like my dance, well then to go to the other side of the dance floor because this is how I dance. You know what I mean? When it just comes out of Ember, that's what it is. And that's one of the funny things about being at this stage of my transition. It's like my parts of my family who hated on me the worst, who wished me to die. I remember like they looked down at my boobs. They're like, "Can't be. It can't be. Those can't be real." uh, but uh, but yeah. So yeah. I mean, I said a lot here, and the main point was to say like. I'm giving you a more vulnerable view, even though it was very vulnerable for me to talk about things like my prior body and stuff like that. To say like, it was almost like a fog of war, but through the fog, I could feel there was a heat somewhere, and I needed to move towards the heat. And it's almost like all my social situations, my career as an attorney, my ex, everything was almost tuned to say, not this way, like don't go, like don't walk any further through the fog. And I was like, I have to, I have to breathe. I have to breathe for my children, for me to live and to love all the way down. Not to prove anything, not to have big ideas, but to finally live, love, dance, sing as Ember, as me, as that place where I don't hide, as that place where what comes out of me is just how my heart beats, how my booty moves. And I don't know why I'll say this at the end, but I'll say it. I already said it at the last video. You know what I want? I always said my man, my kids, my house. But I honestly feel like if I could ask like the cosmos for one thing, especially because I know that my kids feel me finally as mommy, it's my man, which is just to say the polarity that dances with me, that knows what love is. Just like every time that I survived through this journey and stood up and even screamed out in my house to drum and bass in tears, I still know what love is. You know what I meant by that? Not in a poem, not in a not in like a whatever an old novel or some sort of historical reference to love, Shakespearean reference, but um, knowing what love is as my dance all the way down, as that place that kept my fire burning through everything. He doesn't have to do the same dance as me, but he's dancing to the same rhythm and knows that there's nothing more precious than our breath synced, that this wellspring does not get tapped. My wellspring of love goes on forever. You just gotta hold this little ember the right way. You know what I mean? And in that symbiotic, syncretic harmony, we will find like what I call the perpetual motion machine, which is all just a bunch of big Ember words to say that is a dance that never ceases. Not that it doesn't have little missteps, maybe at some point, but we can cuddle it out. But regardless, you know what I mean? Like a jazz band who knows how to play together, the two players who learn how to play better and better, knowing what the rhythm is, the rhythm of love, the rhythm of togetherness. That's the polarity. A man to not see me as an object or fetishize me or see a representational layer of me or see someone who had to switch their life, but the one who kept love alive the entire time. So I could be here to meet you now in this dance all the way down. And watch the last video. That's all I can say. It was very steamy. I don't need to go back into everything. But yeah, my name is Little Ember, and that's just the part of me that doesn't hide. It's not like a baby thing. I'm allowed to be a baby too. I never got to be me. It's just the part of me that is soft, delicate, vulnerable. The little girl in me that never got to dance as me is now dancing all the way, so deal with it. And by that I mean come dance too. I'd love to dance with the real you. Thanks for tuning with me. My name is Ember.